Romantically Ever After. Written by Liwen Ho. Chapter 1. Gracie. Gracie Sutton rounded the corner of the first floor of her dorm building, hugging her canvas laundry bag close to her chest. She shuffled her feet along the cold concrete floor and wished she had put on some real shoes instead of her pink, fuzzy slippers. But time had been of the essence. She had 2 papers to write before Friday, which was only 5 days away. Not to mention a load of laundry that had been sitting sadly in the washing machine the entire night while she'd waited for a dryer to free up. That's what happened when you shared a laundry room with 100 other college students, many of whom forgot about their clothes when they went out to party. But not her. She was only a freshman, but she was invested in her studies, in making good grades. She needed to simply for one reason, to make her mama proud. Just thinking about her mom put a smile on her face. She was so blessed to have a mother who was also her best friend. Their relationship would make Lorelai and Rory from Gilmore Girls jealous, it was that good. Just as close and fun, but not as sarcastic. Oh, her mama was a strong woman with a gorgeous head of strawberry blonde waves, but she was as sweet as they came. And talented. And kind of famous, now that Gracie thought about it. She still couldn't believe Izzy Sutton, her bed and breakfast owner/songwriter mom, was dating America's newest pop sensation, Chase Lockhart. It didn't matter that Chase was younger than her mama. He saw and appreciated her for everything Gracie did. It was a match made in heaven, or the closest place to it on earth, her hometown of Romance, Oregon. Gracie missed her little town with its familiar faces and places on this chilly February morning. Although University of Oregon was only an hour away, she rarely got to go home. She didn't have a car and often had to rely on her mom to pick her up or the generosity of a friend to drive her. She didn't have time for pity parties though, not when she kept herself buried in her textbooks. Which was how she'd been coping for the past 6 months. Gracie shifted the laundry bag to her hip as she approached the elevator and pressed the call button. She tapped her foot impatiently as she watched the numbers above the doors light up. 4, 3, 2, 1. She rocked on her heels as the doors slid open, ready to bound inside. Her fingers were itching to get back to her computer. The doors opened, and she stepped inside the empty elevator, just as someone bumped into her from behind. Her bag slipped from her hands and tumbled onto the floor. A few articles of her freshly laundered clothing fell out, landing in a small pile. "Sorry, Gracie." She turned around at the sound of a familiar voice that was not quite a man's but no longer a boy's. She should have known. Trouble was never too far away when Brady Hanson was around. "Brady, what happened?" A pair of blue-gray eyes, along with a sheepish smile, greeted her. "I tripped. I was walking in," he nodded toward the dorm's front door, "when I saw you getting into the elevator and I ran to catch up with you. But my head was moving faster than my feet. Sorry." Gracie sighed, not knowing whether to smile or shake her head at her best friend's clumsiness. "It's okay. Next time, just call for me to hold the elevator for you." He rubbed the back of his neck in chagrin. "Good idea. Why didn't I think of that?" He squeezed one eye shut and twisted his lips to one side. "There, I made a mental note of it." She laughed and rolled her eyes. Even though part of her was irritated at having her clean clothes lying on the floor, she couldn't help feeling better now that Brady was here. He was like a ray of sunshine in an otherwise overcast day, and she'd seen plenty of clouds having lived in the Northwest all her life. It was rather appropriate, considering Brady was from Southern California, the land of sunshine and stars, Hollywood ones, that is. Chase was from LA, too, and having both him and Brady in her life made her feel a little more glamorous than the small-town girl that she was. She reached over and gave Brady's arm a playful nudge. "You are so silly." He winced as the elevator doors began closing on his shoulders. "Ouch. Silly and squished. Get in here before you become a sandwich." Gracie yanked him inside, pulling him with a little more force than intended. His lanky frame collided into her, and they both tumbled to the ground. She felt his full weight on her chest, making it hard to breathe. "Brady, now I'm the one getting squished. Can you get up, please?" Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to," he mumbled as he backed away. His gaze landed on the clothes on the floor, and he scooped them up and dropped them into her lap. "Here you go." "Thanks." Gracie stuffed the clothes back into the bag, thankful only a couple of shirts had fallen out. Brady was the closest thing she'd ever had to a brother, but that didn't mean she wanted him to see her intimates. That'd be embarrassing. She pulled on the bag's drawstring to ensure it was closed tightly, then stood up. She pressed the button for the 4th floor. The elevator began to move, and she released a long breath, feeling her mood rise with each passing floor. Now that Brady was here, maybe they could study together. That'd be a lot more fun than sitting in her room alone. She was about to propose a studying session when she noticed his bright red face. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, totally fine. I'm just hot with this jacket on and the heater going full blast in here." He gestured to the walls around them, keeping his gaze straight ahead. When the elevator doors opened, he squeezed past her and exited. "I gotta go. See you later, okay?" "Okay." She'd barely gotten her answer out as she watched Brady reach the end of the hallway and enter his room. She shrugged as she made her way to her room and unlocked her door. She dropped her bag on the carpet, resolving to fold her laundry during her next study break. Maybe she could watch a cute chick flick while she was at it. Besides studying, that was the other way she passed time. She may not have found her own happily ever after yet, but at least she could enjoy a fictional one. As she sat at the small desk in front of her computer, she wondered if Brady really was okay. He'd been acting a little strange lately, and if she didn't know better, she'd say he was avoiding her. They still hung out in the cafeteria, eating most of their meals together, but once they were done, he'd retreat to his room. She didn't have much experience with guys, she'd never dated, much less kissed one before, but her gut told her this wasn't normal. When she and Brady had first met at orientation, he'd been talkative, goofy, and happy. Lately, he seemed withdrawn and moody. Maybe he was homesick or struggling in his classes. She made a mental note, squeezing one eye shut and twisting her mouth to one side like she'd seen Brady do, to remind herself to ask her mama for advice. Even though her mom hadn't had the best of luck in love until she met Chase, she still understood men better than Gracie did. She didn't even have a relationship with her own father, who'd run off with another woman before she was born. Her mom had never told her the exact details of what had happened, but word traveled far and wide in their small town. All Gracie had to do was casually ask their neighbor, Mrs. Cooper, one question, and she'd get a novel of answers in return. That's how she'd known her dad was living a couple of towns away and how she'd found out his last name, and eventually his Facebook profile. She clicked on one of the open tabs in her browser and found herself face to face with a handsome man in his late 30s. There were streaks of gray in his dirty blonde hair and beard, but also a youthful sparkle in his blue eyes. Blue eyes that resembled her own so much, it was like looking in a mirror. A mirror she'd longed to behold for the past 18 years. It explained why she hadn't inherited her mom's hazel eyes, she was a carbon copy of her father. A dad she only knew about from the photos he posted and a few random things he shared. But she'd found out he loved the beach like she did, as well as funny cat memes. Learning those tidbits of information about Wade Malone made her feel a little more connected to him and a lot more certain he was someone she wanted to know better. Which is why, against her better judgment, she'd sent her father a message yesterday. Part of her hoped it got hidden in his message requests folder, the other part couldn't stop checking to see if he'd written back. If her mama found out she'd contacted her dad, she didn't even want to think about her reaction. She'd never done anything to defy her mom's wishes, and the last thing she wanted was to hurt her. But Gracie couldn't shake the fact that she wanted, no, she needed, to meet her dad. Or at the very least, know that he thought of her. What girl didn't wish that about her own flesh and blood? Ding! Gracie blinked, her eyes not believing the notification that popped up on her monitor. Someone wants to connect with you. Hand trembling, she clicked on the link to open her messages. A new one from Wade Malone flashed, announcing its arrival and jump-starting the pounding in her chest. This was it. Her dad wanted to connect with her. She held her breath as she read the words she longed to hear. Gracie, I'm so happy you found me. I'd love to meet you, too. Brady. She jumped out of her chair and ran for the door. She had to tell Brady the good news.
Chapter 2. Brady. Brady Hanson shook off his puffy winter jacket and fell onto his bed. He covered his eyes with his hands, his palms quickly warming from the heat in his face. Great. If he had a penny for each time he blushed in front of Gracie, he'd have enough money to buy her a couple dozen roses. Not that he ever would do such a thing. Nope, that'd be way too obvious. He was already sure she thought something was up with the way he escaped her company as quickly as possible. He sighed. It was either escape or confess how he felt about her, something he wasn't ready to do. Not today, tomorrow, or ever. He dug his phone from his pocket and switched it on. He clicked on his photo album and scrolled through the pictures he had saved to a folder titled with a simple letter G for Gracie, of course. Scrolling through the pictures, he stopped at ones they had taken a few months ago when they happened to both be wearing their green Oregon Ducks hoodies. He remembered that day well. They were sitting together at a cafe off campus and playing around with her new selfie stick. They'd taken a series of photos, each one showcasing a different expression. The faces they made ranged from normal to serious to downright silly. The last photo though was the one he loved the most. Gracie called it his trademark Brady face, also known as his make a mental note face. When they took it, with the two of them squeezing one eye shut and twisting their mouths to the side, he'd realized something. He was in love with his best friend. Brady loved that Gracie got him. She saw his goofy side and his clumsiness, and she accepted him for who he was. But that was the problem. Everything that she accepted about him was everything she wasn't looking for in a guy. How did he know? It was obvious from the way she went gaga over the actors in those chick flicks she watched. They were all tall, handsome, and charming. Oh, he had the tall part down, but with it came feet that were too big for his body. Handsome and charming though. He'd need a fairy godmother for that. That's how he knew Gracie would never feel the same way about him that he felt about her. And why he couldn't tell her how he felt. Also, why he couldn't be near her, because every time he ended up going gaga and doing something so not cool. Like falling onto her in an elevator and squashing her. She had smelled so good though. Like fresh strawberries on a stack of homemade pancakes, the fluffy kind his mom used to make for him as a kid. He missed his parents and even his two older brothers living back in California, but not as much as he longed for his best friend down the hall. He missed hanging out with Gracie and studying with her. If only there was a way to turn off his heart, so it'd stop trying to fly out of his chest like those cartoon characters did whenever they saw the girl they liked. Brady, open up. I have something to tell you. He shot up and almost fell off the bed at the sound of Gracie's voice outside his door. Whoa. She sounded more excited than he'd ever heard her. Could it be? His heart started pounding as he wondered what she wanted to tell him. Coming. He reached the door in 2 steps and opened it. Hey, what's up? Gracie reached over and enveloped him in a hug, her arms wrapped around his neck. He wrote me, Brady. He wants to see me. He? Who was she talking about? Who wants to see you? She pulled back and jumped up and down in place like a little girl on Christmas morning. My dad. Your dad. I thought you didn't know anything about him. She shut the door behind her before continuing. I found him, Brady. I sent him a Facebook message and he wrote back. He looks just like me, or I look just like him. Either way, he wants to meet me. I'm so happy I feel like I might burst. He watched her spin around, then fall backwards onto his bed with a grin lighting up her blue eyes. He couldn't help but chuckle at the sight of her. When she was happy, he was happy. That's great, Gracie. You've been talking about finding your dad ever since we met. She sat up and swiped at her eyes. I know. It's what I've been dreaming about ever since I was a kid and I realized my friends had a dad and I didn't. I mean, I love my mom so much, but I've always wondered about the other half of me. Now I get to find out. Against his better judgment, he plopped down beside her on the bed. So much for keeping his distance, but he couldn't stand seeing her cry, even if they were tears of joy. He placed an arm around her shoulders and was surprised when she leaned her head on him. He almost stopped breathing, as if doing so would freeze that moment in time. I'm glad you found him. I can't imagine what that's like, not knowing both your parents. I bet he's curious about you, too. You think so? She tilted her head to look up at him. I hope I don't disappoint him. Hey, don't think that. He's going to love you. As much as I love you, Brady wanted to add, but he stopped himself before he said something he'd regret. So, what does your mom think of this? Gracie winced. She doesn't know I contacted him. I haven't told her, and I don't know if I will. Really? This wasn't the girl he knew. Gracie called her mom almost every day and told her just about everything that happened at school. He knew this because he was usually with her when she called. He'd never met Miss Sutton, but he was sure she knew all there was to know about him, including his shoe size. That's a surprise. I thought you told her everything. I do, which is why it's killing me to keep this a secret from her. I just don't know what she'd do or say. What if she doesn't want me to meet him? I'm so close, Brady, I don't want to risk it. But don't you think she'd have a good reason if she didn't want you to meet him? I mean, she obviously knows him and you don't. He swallowed the last of his words when he saw the wet sheen on her eyes. I just don't want you to get hurt. She nodded. I know. I just need to do this my way, for now at least. I'll tell my mom when I'm ready. She paused, a line forming between her brows. This is a lot for me to ask, but can you keep this between you and me? Please, Brady. She didn't need to ask him twice. He'd do anything for her. Yeah, of course. Thank you. She leaned over and gave him a quick squeeze. You're the best friend a girl could ask for. The scent of strawberries filled his senses, rendering him speechless. Or it could have been the fact that Gracie had hugged him twice in one afternoon. Whatever the case, Brady could feel his whole body warming from her touch. He ducked his head, certain his cheeks were on fire, again. "Hey, are you okay?" "Totally," he managed to utter, avoiding her gaze. She stood up and crossed the room to the door. "Well, that's all I came by for. I'll be in my room studying. Feel free to join me if you want to. I'll need someone to keep me on track so I can finish my papers. I have a feeling I'm going to have a hard time concentrating after this." "Sure, maybe later." "Okay. See you later," she added before leaving the room. Brady released the breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Oh man, he had it bad. He'd never felt this way about a girl before, and he'd had lots of crushes back in high school. His brothers teased him about being a hopeless romantic, but that was kind of his thing. He'd rather watch a sappy movie or listen to a love song than anything else. Not that he didn't like action films or stuff like that. But he liked happy endings and all the good emotions that went with them. He liked all the warm fuzzy feelings he had when he was with Gracie. And boy, he sure had a lot of them. Which was why he wouldn't be going over to study with her, even though his heart desperately wanted to. How would he keep her on task when he couldn't focus with her around? Yeah, it was not going to happen. He'd meet up with her for dinner, but that was it. It would also give him another chance to find out more about her dad. He wasn't sure why, but he had some hesitations about her meeting up with a stranger. Maybe he could offer to drive her. If he couldn't be her Prince Charming, he'd settle for being her chauffeur.
Chapter 3. Gracie. The week flew by, and Saturday finally arrived. Gracie had turned in her assignments for the week and was now on her way home. She looked over at the boy sitting next to her in the driver's seat. Brady's profile had become so familiar to her since he often drove her around, whether it was to the movies or to the store. He'd never driven her home though, and she'd been surprised when he'd offered. Why he would want to spend a weekend in a quaint town, she didn't understand. But she was grateful, so grateful, for his company today. Her stomach was in knots for 2 reasons. 1, she was meeting her dad tomorrow, and 2, she had to keep the meeting a secret from her mom. The question was, which task would be scarier? "Are you warm enough?" Brady turned the heat on in his little 2-seater. "You're shaking." She noticed her hands trembling in her lap and quickly balled them into fists. The action did little to calm her nerves, her heart was still racing in her chest. "I'm scared, Brady," she admitted. "I'm afraid my mom will take one look at me and know I'm lying to her." "Technically, you're not lying. Just withholding the truth." Biting her lower lip, she pondered his words. "It might as well be lying because I feel horrible about it. I've never lied to her before." "Never?" "Come on, there must have been at least one time." "Sure, but not about something that counted. Something big and life-changing like this." She paused as she stared out the passenger window. They had long left their college town with its many buildings and the bustle of people and cars. Only open fields surrounded them now on either side of I-5. With each highway marker they passed, the last one read 252, they were that much closer to home. Soon, they'd be hitting signal lights and nearing downtown Romance, and Interlude Inn. Gracie gulped. Have you ever kept something important from a person you loved? It's not hard to do when I'm an hour away from home, but what's going to happen when I'm in the same room with my mom? I won't be able to look at her, much less talk to her. Brady made a funny, strangled sound, then started coughing. His face turned a bright red shade that matched the color of his polo shirt. Wrong, tube. Gracie patted him on the back, wondering if she'd have to take the wheel from him. Do you want to pull over at the next exit? He shook his head while squeezing out a small smile. After a moment, his shoulders stopped shaking and he took a deep breath. I'm all good now. She eyed him curiously. He'd been turning red a lot lately. Was he not feeling well? Are you feverish? You should have told me if you're feeling sick. You could have stayed in bed instead of driving me home. No, I'm not sick, he cut in. It was just something you said that got me thinking. You know, about keeping a secret from someone you care about. I get what you mean. It's hard, really, really hard. Are you sure this is what you want to do? Shrugging, she weighed her options. I guess I could casually bring up my dad and see how she reacts. I haven't asked her about him in a long time though, maybe since I was 10. She gets this sad look in her eyes when she talks about him. Or she used to. Maybe with Chase around now, it won't bother her so much. What do you think? Brady's complexion had returned to normal. He pursed his mouth as he thought. You're probably right. She has a new guy in her life. That should make what happened in the past sting less. I hope so. I mean, I want her to be happy, regardless of what happens with me and my dad. I know there's no chance of them getting back together, so this isn't about that. It's about me getting some answers. Maybe if you told her that, she'd understand. Yeah. Thanks, Brady, for driving me, and not just for that, but for listening and supporting me. It means a lot to me. He turned toward her, letting his gaze rest on her for an extra beat. It's my pleasure. He faced forward again. It'll be nice to meet your mom. And Chase Lockhart, too, if he's there. Do you know if he'll be there? The excitement in his voice was hard to miss. He grinned, looking relaxed and happy, like the old Brady she remembered. She couldn't help but smile, too. Yup. Mama said he took a few days off from recording to celebrate Valentine's Day with her. So you'll get to meet America's newest pop sensation. I understand now why you offered to drive me, she joked. That's not the reason why, though it doesn't hurt that I get to meet one of my favorite singers. I still can't believe you know him and your mom writes his songs. Welcome to my glamorous life. Gracie wrinkled her nose and laughed. I'm so kidding. My mama's the one with the talent and looks made for Hollywood, she just never made it there. I always wondered what would have happened if she had left town with my dad after high school graduation. It's too bad she got pregnant with me. She couldn't leave after that. Brady grew quiet. When he finally spoke, he sounded sad. You're blaming yourself for what happened, but it wasn't your fault, Gracie. You can't think that way. Your parents made choices in life and they're the ones responsible for them, not you. She swallowed hard past the lump that had formed in her throat. How did he know? She'd always blamed herself for ruining her mom's life and even breaking her parents up. That's why she studied so hard and tried to be the best daughter possible. It was a heavy burden to bear, and she didn't think she'd ever do enough to make it up to her mom. But here was Brady telling her it wasn't up to her, that it wasn't her responsibility. Gracie took a deep breath as she pondered his words. You really think so? I feel like I've been holding her back from her dreams. I wonder if she regrets having me. No way. She loves you. I hear the way she talks to you whenever you call home. You can't fake that kind of excitement, especially not day after day. The two of you talk, he dragged out his next words, a lot. It's kinda crazy, but in a good way. She laughed at the awe in his tone. It is crazy how well we get along. I guess it helps that she's so young. Can you believe she had me at our age? Imagine being a parent at 18. That is crazy. It's basically a kid raising another kid. Yeah, she had to grow up fast. She missed out on being young and carefree. Well, I guess it works out that she's dating a younger guy, someone who can help her feel young, too. For sure. I'm so happy she met Chase. They're so good together. The 11-year difference had been hard for her mom to get over at first, but Chase had convinced her that numbers didn't matter. He was pretty mature for his age, as far as Gracie could tell. Still, he was a bit too young to be a father figure, not that she expected him to be, especially since her dad was in the picture again. Say, do you guys do anything special in town for Valentine's Day? I only ask because it seems like it would be a big deal for you guys. Oh, you have no idea. Gracie didn't know where to start. She was sure Brady would think her whole town was crazy. The day's treated as an official holiday, a lot of the businesses close, even the schools. And everyone gets together for a big charity ball held in the evening. A ball? Like a fancy one where you dress up and dance? Pretty much. It's at the Donaldson House, a beautiful historic home with a big wraparound porch. She sighed, remembering how beautiful the building had been in previous years when the ball was held there. It looks so pretty when all the lights are on and there are flowers everywhere. It's one of my favorite places downtown. That sounds cool, like a scene straight out of a movie. Yeah. It's too bad Valentine's Day is on a Wednesday this year. It's not like we can ask our profs for a day off. I'm going to miss the celebrations. We're both done with classes early on Wednesday. Maybe we could do something to celebrate together, like dinner and a movie? He paused before quickly adding, only if you want to. Gracie's spirits lifted at Brady's suggestion. Sure, that's a good idea. It wouldn't be as fun as a real Valentine's date, but it'd be nice to not have to spend the day alone. Yeah. Brady checked his rearview mirror, then changed lanes to the right. I think we're getting close, right? Yeah, you can take the next exit. She snuck a peek at Brady out of the corner of her eye. Was that disappointment she'd heard in his voice? Maybe he felt sad about spending Valentine's Day with her. Was there someone else he'd rather spend it with? The thought of having to share him with another girl irked her a bit for some reason. But truthfully, she'd be happy for him if he met someone who made him happy, like Chase did for her mom. He was her best friend, after all. She only wished the best for him. He turned off the freeway and asked, "Are we going to the inn first? Do you mind if we stop by the flower shop? Romantic Blooms is on the way home. I want to get my mom a bouquet." Sure thing. Can we also stop by that chocolate shop you told me about? I'd like to get her something, too. Sicily's? Yeah, of course, but you don't need to get her anything. I'd prefer not to show up empty-handed, especially since she's letting me stay over for free. I want to make a good impression. Gracie smiled. Don't worry. She already loves you as much as I do. Brady's jaw dropped. His face flushed again, the pink tinge spreading from his cheek to the tip of his ear. He fumbled with the car's control panel, switching the heat off and replacing it with cold air. She watched his color return to normal as his sandy brown hair blew about in the wind. Are you sure you're feeling okay? Yeah, I'm great. Great or not, she was going to keep an eye on him this weekend. She couldn't help but wonder if something was going on with Brady that he wasn't telling her about. The thought disturbed her, which was ironic, considering how she was keeping a secret from her mom. Maybe lying wasn't a great idea, after all.
Chapter 4. Brady. Brady took one step inside Interlude Inn and immediately felt at home. All the worries he'd had over meeting Gracie's mom disappeared as soon as she greeted him with a warm hug. He handed her the box of chocolates he'd bought downtown and gave her an enthusiastic smile. It was the first time he'd ever met a girlfriend's parent, not that Gracie was his girlfriend. But a guy could hope, right? Especially when visiting a town named Romance. "Why, thank you, Brady," Gracie's mom exclaimed. "You didn't have to bring anything." "It was no problem, ma'am." "Thank you for having me." "Ma'am? There's no need to be so formal. Call me Izzy or Miss Sutton if you must. It's so nice to finally meet you in person. Gracie's told me so much about you, I feel like I know everything about you, except for your shoe size." She glanced down at his sneakers. "Let me guess, you're an 11. "You're right, Mama," Gracie piped up. "When did you become an expert on men's feet?" Miss Sutton grinned. "Ever since a certain man with size 11 feet walked into my life." She gestured to the baseball cap on Brady's head. "You'll want to take that off. The other guy in my life isn't too fond of those." Brady removed his cap and ran a hand through his hair. Hopefully he already made a good enough impression with Miss Sutton that she wouldn't mind his messy hair. "The other guy?" "Thor, of course," Gracie informed him. At the sound of his name, the black Labrador mix Gracie had told him her mom recently adopted came bounding into the room. His nails made a high-pitched click-clack sound on the wooden floor. He came up to Brady and sniffed him thoroughly before licking him with his long, pink tongue. "Hey, boy." Brady knelt to pat Thor's back and was rewarded with a slobbery kiss to the face. "What about me?" Gracie pretended to pout. She patted her thigh to call for Thor, who promptly trotted over to her. He licked her, then lay down for a tummy rub. "It's good to see you, too." Brady grinned as he watched Gracie interact with Thor. Her blue eyes lit up to the point where they seemed to sparkle, and it made him happy to see her so relaxed. She could get so intense when she studied. It was nice to see this side of her. He wondered though if he was being too intense himself by staring at her. He switched his attention instead to the walls around him. He'd never stayed in a bed and breakfast before, but it looked like a regular home, just with some fancy music-themed artwork. It smelled like home, too. The aroma of apples and cinnamon wafting in the air made his stomach rumble, even though he and Gracie had stopped for lunch 2 hours ago. Miss Sutton noticed him sniffing the air. "Would you be interested in a slice of my apple cake, Brady?" "That sounds delicious." "Sure, if it's not too much trouble." "It's no trouble at all." "Gracie, why don't you show Brady to his room? I'll get all of us something to eat and drink." "Thanks, Mama." Gracie stood up and pulled him to his feet. She nodded toward the staircase. "Come on. You get to stay in my old room." He hoisted his backpack onto his shoulder and followed her upstairs. "Your room? Where will you be staying?" "With my mom in her room. It's our thing. We usually stay up late to talk and watch a movie. It also leaves a room free in case she has a customer. There are always some out-of-town visitors who come to Romance to check out the Valentine's Ball." Gracie's tone was casual, but he noticed how her shoulders had stiffened when she mentioned staying with her mom. "You can have your room. I don't mind sleeping on the couch downstairs." She looked over her shoulder at him as they reached the second floor. "Don't be silly. I want you to have a good night's sleep, especially since you seem to be coming down with something." If she only knew the kind of bug he'd caught. There was no cure for crushing on your best friend. At least none that he knew of, because if there was, he'd be the first to take it. But won't it be weird for you to be so close to her? You know, all the stuff you said in the car. She shushed him with a finger to her lips. A door opened behind them and a man in his mid-20s stepped into the hall. Chase. Gracie, you're back. It's good to see you. Brady's jaw dropped as he realized Chase Lockhart was standing right in front of him. Whoa. Chase leaned over to give Gracie a hug, then extended his hand toward him. You must be Brady. I've heard a lot about you. Welcome to romance. Thanks. He took Chase's hand, noting how strong and calloused his fingers were. He looked even taller in person. It's great to meet you, sir. Please, call me Chase. Sir makes me sound old enough to be your father, and I'm definitely not anywhere close to that. But that doesn't mean, he narrowed his eyes, I won't be keeping an eye on you. Only when Chase winked, did Brady release his breath. Yes, sir, I mean, Chase. Gracie gawked at them. Oh goodness, Brady's a friend, she emphasized with wide eyes. You must have Valentine's Day on your brain, Chase. Chase smiled. Yeah, I guess I do. I'm so glad I was able to make it home for the holiday. I can't wait to take your mom to the ball. I know Mama can't wait either. We're going to go look at dresses later. Great. Then Brady and I can spend some quality man-to-man time together. Brady gulped. Chase was only a year older than his oldest brother, but somehow he managed to give off dad vibes. Scary dad vibes. If Brady thought he had to impress Miss Sutton, he was wrong. It looked like he'd need to win Chase over, too. Sounds good, sir, Chase. Cool. I'm heading down to grab a bite to eat. I'll see you guys later. Chase nodded at them before heading downstairs. Gracie opened the door to a room on the left and ushered him inside. Here's where you'll be sleeping. Brady dropped his backpack onto the floor and looked around, his eyes stopping at a portrait hanging above the full-sized bed. A young blonde girl stared back at him with a pair of familiar bright blue eyes. That's you. You were so cute. Not that you're not cute now. He clamped his mouth shut before he said more. The amused grin Gracie was giving him made his heart skip. She was more than cute, she was beautiful. He dropped his gaze and pretended to be interested in a basket of lotions on the bedside table. Thanks, she offered with a chuckle. My mom hung that up here after I went to college. I used to have a poster of Chris Hemsworth there. She says my picture is much more suitable for a B&B. Her picture was a lot less intimidating than a picture of the well-built actor who played a superhero. If that was the kind of guy Gracie liked, he didn't stand a chance. I didn't know you liked Marvel movies. Just the ones with Thor in them. He has the most beautiful hair, don't you agree? You like his hair. Brady smiled. I thought you just liked his muscles. She laughed. That goes without saying. He swallowed a groan. Of course. She stuck her hands in the back pockets of her jeans and rocked on her heels. So, can you believe Chase? He was, like, interrogating you as if you were a guy I was bringing home to meet my parents. I've never seen that side of him before. It's pretty crazy, don't you think? He swallowed hard, his stomach flipping and flopping at the opportunity that Gracie's question presented. This was a perfect chance for him to test the waters, to see what she thought of him. All his fears suddenly disappeared. Maybe it was the idea of being in a town called Romance that made him believe romance was possible for him. He had possibly found the most perfect girl for him, so why not? What if not saying how he felt would be a greater regret than saying it? He cleared his throat, then smiled. Which part's crazy? The fact that he's acting like a dad or that he's implying there's something going on between us? Gracie blinked. Yes, and yes. Both, I guess. He waited for her to say more and lost his boldness in the seconds that passed. So much for taking a chance. There they were, both avoiding each other's eyes as silence dropped like a heavy curtain between them. Great. If he needed any more evidence that Gracie wasn't interested in him, he had it. He tried to laugh off the discomfort. It's totally crazy. It's like you said, he has Valentine's Day on the brain. The buzzing of a phone sounded, putting an end to the awkward conversation. Gracie pulled her phone from her back pocket and swiped open the screen. Her eyes lit up as she mouthed, "It's him." Who? She closed the door before answering in a hushed voice, "My dad. He's texting me about tomorrow. Breakfast at 9. Can you drive me, Brady? We'll be meeting at the Good Egg. It's about 10 minutes from here." Of course. But what about your mom and Chase? Will they expect us to eat with them? Not tomorrow. They're taking Thor to the vet for a checkup, so we're on our own. It works out perfectly. I guess so. Brady didn't see anything perfect about lying to Miss Sutton, but he told himself it was for a good reason. Seeing Gracie happy was as good a reason as any. The sound of boots clicking on the wooden floor echoed in the hall until it stopped outside the room. Brady? Miss Sutton asked through the door. The water's ready for tea. There was a pause before she added, "Is Gracie in there?" "I'm here, Mama," Gracie called out as she opened the door. Her mom nearly fell into the room, only stopping her fall when she braced herself against the doorway. When she found her footing, she gave them a stern look. "Brady, I would appreciate you keeping the door open when the two of you are alone together." Brady quickly nodded. She looked so serious, he considered saluting, too, if that would have helped. However, the sad truth was that she didn't need to worry about what he and Gracie did behind closed doors. "Of course, Miss Sutton. Thank you. Now, why don't the two of you come have some apple cake before Chase eats it all? That man can eat. I just made the cake yesterday, and it's almost all gone." Gracie answered, a relieved look softening her features, "Come on, Brady. Mama's apple cake is the best. It's way better than the chocolate cake you always get in the cafeteria." "It sounds great, but I think I'm gonna wash up first and join you guys in a bit." "All right. You better hurry though." "I wasn't joking about Chase's appetite," Miss Sutton warned him with a wink. He watched them head downstairs, then shut the door. He slumped against it, feeling as if his heart had closed up shop as well. His hunger from earlier suddenly vanished. Who could eat when they had just been dumped? Even though Gracie hadn't turned him down in so many words, the truth was clear. He might be in a town called Romance, but there was no chance of it for him. He'd have to settle for being Gracie's friend, the worst role possible for a guy in love.
Chapter 5. Gracie. After eating dinner with Chase and Brady, Gracie and her mom ventured downtown to Desiree's dresses to search for the perfect gown. She was thankful they had a task to complete because, quite honestly, she needed a distraction from all the thoughts weighing on her mind. There was the matter of her secret meeting with her dad tomorrow, but a new issue had emerged earlier that day, her relationship with Brady. Oh boy. She couldn't believe she'd been so oblivious. It all made sense now why he'd been turning as red as a tomato lately. Brady liked her. As in an honest-to-goodness, "I have a crush on my best friend," kind of like. And Gracie had no idea what to do about it. She tried to distract herself by watching her mom spin around in front of the full-length mirror. They had spent half an hour picking out dresses, finally narrowing down the selection to 6. Most of the shop's customers had finished their shopping by then, so they had the dressing room to themselves. Her mom had already vetoed 3 dresses and was trying on her 4th, a red floor-length gown. It hugged her petite frame in all the right places and complemented her strawberry blonde locks. Seeing the color red, however, reminded Gracie of Valentine's Day, which in turn reminded her of Brady. She was back at square one again. She sighed, not knowing what else to do. Izzy turned to face her. She studied her for a moment before asking, "What's going on, Gracie?" Oh no. She could never hide her emotions from her mom. What do you mean? Lifting the hem of her dress, Izzy carefully walked over to sit by her. You were quiet all throughout dinner, and now, you're sighing like it's the end of the world. This isn't like you. Talk to me, sweetheart. You know you can tell me anything. Does this have something to do with Brady? She nodded readily. How'd you know? I'm your mother, silly. I know you better than anyone. Did you guys have a fight? A fight? No, not at all. We never fight. We get along really well. I'm glad to hear that. It's important to be in a relationship with someone who understands you. Gracie balked. A relationship? Brady and I aren't dating. We're just friends. She paused as a realization came to her. I understand now why you didn't want us closing the door earlier. Her mom winced. It's not that I don't trust you, sweetheart. I just remember what it's like to be young and in love. Mama, I'm not in love. How many times did she need to say it? I love Brady, but only as a friend. The problem is, she bit her lower lip, I think he might like me. It's pretty obvious to both me and Chase that he does. I thought you did too, considering how much you talk about him and the fact that you guys spend almost every free minute together. That's because he's so easy to talk to. He's like the brother I never had. But there's nothing romantic about our relationship. Nothing at all. No. I just don't see him as anything more than a friend. He's nice and sweet, but he's not the kind of guy who sweeps a girl off her feet. He'd be more likely to trip over his own feet and take me down with him. She winced, remembering their mishap in the dorm elevator. What am I supposed to do, Mama? I still want to be friends, but things are already weird. Sometimes he doesn't know how to act around me, and now I don't know how to treat him either. I don't want to hurt him. Izzy placed a comforting arm around her shoulders. Sweetheart, the thing is, you will end up hurting him, no matter how hard you try not to. But you can make things easier by giving him the space he needs to move on. When he pulls back, you need to let him go. Holding on and trying to act like nothing's changed will only make it worse. Gracie sensed there was a lot more to her mom's advice than she was saying. There was the same wistfulness in her tone that she used to have when she talked about the past. Are you talking about you and Dad? She released a heavy breath. I know you wonder why he never kept in touch with you. It's not that he didn't want to, Gracie. I asked him not to. What? Gracie's stomach dropped. Why? Why would you do that? Because it was too hard for me. He had moved on and found someone else, so I had to move on, too. But I couldn't if he was still a part of my life, our lives. So, I asked him not to contact me anymore. She brought her hand to Gracie's cheek and gently brushed back a lock of hair that had fallen out of her ponytail. I'm sorry I never told you. Gracie swallowed hard, her mouth dry. She couldn't believe her ears. All these years, she could have had a relationship with her dad. The only reason she hadn't was because it was too hard for her mom. Didn't her mom think it was hard for her to grow up without a father? How could you? You kept him from me. Sweetheart, there's more to the story. She shot to her feet. I don't want to hear it. You've been lying to me all this time. Her voice echoed in the dressing room, loud but shaky. She'd never talked back to her mom before, but it was too late to turn back now. The emotions swirling around in her body couldn't be contained. The sound of high-heeled shoes clicking against the tile floor approached the dressing room. Desiree, the middle-aged shop owner, strode in, her perfectly groomed brows high on her forehead. Izzy, Gracie? Is everything all right in here? We're fine, Izzy answered for them both. She glanced at the clock on the wall and stood up. I didn't realize it was so late. Let me change and we'll get out of your hair, Desiree. There's no rush. I know how important it is to find the right dress for the ball. Desiree eyed Gracie for a moment. You know what, Gracie dear? I have just the one for you. Arms crossed against her chest, Gracie shook her head adamantly. I'm not going to the ball. I don't need a dress. Oh, but you have the perfect complexion for it. Let me show it to you. You could wear it for a date night. I'm not dating. Gracie rolled her eyes, her protests falling on deaf ears. Desiree rushed out of the dressing room and promptly returned with a dark pink party dress. Accented with spaghetti straps and a short skirt, it was perfect for a college-aged girl. Try it on for fun. You never know when you'll need to dress up. Gracie was too emotionally spent to argue, so she took the dress and entered the stall next to her mom's. She plopped down on the bench and leaned against the wall. As if her mind wasn't already jumbled enough, now she had this new revelation to deal with, too. She wished Brady was there for her to talk to. No, she couldn't go to him anymore. It would be selfish of her to lean on him when she didn't reciprocate his feelings. She was too upset to talk to her mom. The only person left was her dad. It was fitting that she would be seeing him tomorrow. Nothing was going to stand in the way of their meeting, she'd make sure of it. Are you ready, dear? Come on out and show us the dress, Desiree urged through the door. Almost, Gracie called out. She changed out of her jeans and sweatshirt and slipped on the dress. The satin material felt cool against her skin. She smoothed the skirt down and turned to face the mirror. As soon as she saw her reflection, she gasped. The dress fit her perfectly. The color went well with her fair skin, and the length was just right for showing off her legs. Her next thought surprised her. She found herself wondering what Brady would think of her in this dress, which was crazy because she didn't care what he thought, or did she? She stepped out to the sound of soft applause. Desiree gave her an approving smile, but it was her mom's face that made her throat constrict. There were tears in her mom's eyes and she wore such a look of pride that Gracie felt guilty for being upset with her earlier. Do you like it? Oh, sweetheart, you look beautiful. It was made for you. Both of you ladies look lovely, Desiree chimed in. May I assume you'll be taking both dresses home today? Yes, definitely, her mom answered. I don't need this dress, Mama. I have nowhere to wear it to. You can hold on to it until you do, she replied firmly, signaling the end of their discussion. She turned to Desiree and informed her, we'll take both. Desiree beamed. Wonderful. I'll ring you up when you're ready. When Desiree had left the dressing room, her mom approached her and reached for her hands. I've always wanted the best for you, Gracie. please believe me. I would never do anything to hurt you." When her mom searched her eyes for some sign of acknowledgement, she nodded without hesitation. It was second nature for her to listen to and obey her mother, she always had, and part of her didn't know how not to. This was the woman who worked so hard to make ends meet, so Gracie could be the first one in their family to attend college. Everything she had was because of the sacrifices her mom made. But those sacrifices had come at a steep cost, the absence of her father in her life. Gracie's cheeks heated again as she pondered all that she'd missed out on. Birthdays, holidays, graduation. Her dad should have been there for her milestones. She loosened her hands from her mom's grip and dropped them to her side. Her breathing grew shallow as she tried to keep from crying. Taking a step back, she allowed a deliberate gap to form between them. Lips trembling, she murmured, "I'm going to change," then took refuge in her dressing room. After they'd paid for the dresses, they drove the short route home in uncomfortable silence. For the first time in her life, Gracie wondered if she and her mom would ever be close again.
Chapter 6. Brady. Brady lay awake, replaying the events of that evening. After Gracie and Miss Sutton had left to go shopping, he and Chase had spent some quality guy time together. This translated to playing video games and having brief snatches of conversation when they weren't trying to outrace or outshoot one another. Having grown up in a competitive family, Brady was used to games and sports as a way of bonding. He was thankful Chase Lockhart was a regular guy off the stage. He was easy to talk to, humble, and down to earth. Hanging out with a pop star for the evening hadn't been so intimidating after all. After they'd played for an hour and a half, Brady let Chase declare victory and turned in for the night. He'd figured it would be easier to avoid Gracie, and any further opportunities for embarrassment, if he was in his room when she returned. Stretching his full frame out in his bed, he raised one arm and rested his head on his palm. He arched his neck to look at the portrait hanging above him. The light from the bedside lamp cast a dim glow on a pair of familiar blue eyes. He couldn't keep the corners of his mouth from turning up. Gracie's cheeky grin, aside from a gap where her front teeth should be, was still the same. The expression on her face radiated joy and sweetness. He loved it when she smiled at him like that. It made him feel a lot less clumsy and awkward and a little more dashing and charming. If only he hadn't gone and made things weird between them. Who knew if she'd ever smile at him like that again? Squeezing his eyes shut, he tried to block out the memories of that afternoon. Maybe things would look better in the morning. At the very least, he could try acting more normal. Toss his feelings for Gracie aside and stop acting like a dork. And get back to being friends. That would surely be better than losing her friendship completely. A good stretch of time passed with him tossing and turning every few minutes. When sleep wouldn't come, he opened his eyes to check the time. It was nearly midnight. His stomach grumbled as it usually did when he stayed up this late to study. He knew from experience that if he didn't eat something, he'd have an even harder time falling asleep. He sat up and threw on his Oregon Ducks hoodie over his t-shirt. He padded on bare feet to the bedroom door and opened it. Several treble clef wall sconces lit up the hallway with light from their electric candles. He closed his door and headed toward the stairs, careful to walk slowly so as not to disturb anyone. When he reached the first floor, he headed straight for the kitchen. It wasn't until he'd passed the living room that he saw the profile of someone sitting on the sofa. Gracie. What was she doing out of bed? He shuffled in her direction, concern replacing his curiosity. Maybe she was still anxious about meeting her dad? He approached slowly, wondering if she'd want to talk. When he neared the sofa, a wet, black nose cut him off. Thor, hey, buddy. Gracie turned around at the sound of his voice. Thor returned to her side and rested his head on her lap. The blanket that had been pulled up to her chin slipped down. "Brady? What are you doing up?" "I couldn't sleep, then I got hungry." She nodded knowingly. "And if you don't eat, you won't be able to sleep." He grinned. She knew him so well. "Yep. What about you?" "I thought you were sleeping upstairs with your mom." "It's a long story." She sighed. After asking Thor to move his head, she shook off her blanket and slipped her feet into a pair of fuzzy pink slippers on the wooden floor. The slippers matched her heart-patterned pajamas. "Come on. Let's get you some food." Brady followed her into the kitchen where she pulled out a plate of leftover pot roast from the refrigerator. His mouth watered, remembering the savory flavor of the tender beef, potatoes, and carrots from dinner that night. "That looks so good. Are you sure I can finish it?" "Yeah, Chase has another plate saved." Gracie popped the dish into the microwave oven and turned it on. After a minute, she removed the food and handed it to him, along with a fork. "Careful, it's hot." "Thanks." Brady paused, his toes curling as he debated where to eat. Gracie seemed to read his mind because she nodded toward the living room. "You can eat on the couch. Or I could eat in my room if you want to sleep." She shook her head firmly. "It's okay. I don't think I'll be sleeping much tonight." She returned to her place on the sofa and made some room for him. Brady sat down and began eating as Thor found a new spot to sleep at their feet. After he'd taken enough bites to satisfy his stomach for a while, he faced Gracie. She'd curled up into a ball, with her knees close to her chest. Now that he was close, he saw her red-rimmed eyes. His stomach dropped as he wondered what she'd been crying over. "I'm ready to listen if you want to talk." Gracie peeked at him from the corner of her eye. Doubt flickered on her face before she finally nodded. "Thanks, Brady. You're a really good friend." He didn't need a course in dating 101 to know that the emphasis she put on the word really was her way of letting him down easy. He was clearly in the friend zone. Taking a deep breath, he made up his mind to make the most of the situation. Gracie needed a friend, so he would play that role for as long as she'd let him. "Is this about seeing your dad tomorrow, I mean today?" "Kind of." She bit her bottom lip and frowned. "And also about my mom." Gracie proceeded to fill him in on what her mom had revealed to her and her shock at the news. "Wow, this is a lot to take in. Tell me about it." "I could have had a relationship with my dad my whole life instead of waiting 18 years to meet him. All this time, I thought he was too busy with work or a new family to have time for me. I should have looked for him sooner, Brady. I missed out on so much." Her voice broke as a single tear fell down her cheek. Hey, his heart ached to see her so upset. He set his plate down on the floor, then scooted closer to Gracie. The couch sank slightly in the middle from their weight. Without a second thought, he brought one arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "You won't be missing out anymore. You already started a relationship with your dad when you messaged him. After today, you'll have the rest of your life to get to know him." She nodded, her face buried in his sweatshirt. She took a couple of shaky breaths until her breathing evened out. "I'm sorry things turned out like this. I was hoping you'd have a good time shopping with your mom tonight." "Oh, Brady, it was horrible. I was horrible." She sighed. "You should have seen the look on her face when I told her I was sleeping downstairs. I've never seen her so crushed. And it's all my fault. I know things seem bad now, but they'll get better. You guys have such a strong relationship. You can get through this." But I've never stopped talking to my mom before. It's like I'm ghosting her. It's just rude and sad. The one person I can talk to about anything is the one person I can't talk to right now. Hey, I know I'm not your mom, but you can talk to me. I'm here to listen anytime, he murmured into her soft hair. He would hold Gracie all night if she'd let him. As soon as he said those words, he felt her stiffen and pull away. I don't mind. I shouldn't be doing this to you. I'm sorry. He couldn't read all the emotions flickering on her face, but he was sure of one: regret. Ouch. Did she not want to be friends anymore? What do you mean? We're friends. This is what friends do. They listen and support each other. A line appeared between her brows as she regarded him. I know, and I appreciate your support so much. I don't think I should rely on you. Why not? I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. You're such a good guy and such a good friend, he cut in, not wanting to drag on the uncomfortable moment any longer. Yes. Friend, Gracie repeated with obvious hesitation. What are you trying to say? He blurted out the question before he lost his nerve. Maybe it was time they got things out in the open, once and for all. It couldn't possibly be worse than being rejected in this backhanded way, could it? Just be straight with me, Gracie. I can take it. Brady, you've become one of my closest friends. I don't want that to change. Everything else in my life has turned upside down. I really need us to stay the same. Us? How ironic. According to Gracie, there was no us to talk about, but he got her point. The truth was clear in her blue eyes. Blue eyes that appeared a little more icy than their usual sky blue color, or perhaps they looked that way because of his blurred vision. He bowed his head and blinked back tears. Okay, he really needed to pull it together. Get his head out of the clouds and stop dreaming about a relationship that would never happen. Brady? Gracie's hand was on his arm, offering more pain than comfort. He pasted on a smile and lifted his gaze to meet hers. I hear you loud and clear. Don't worry. Nothing's going to change between us. She paused for a beat before she withdrew her hand. Thank you. He couldn't miss the weariness in her voice. I'll let you get some sleep. He gathered his plate and stood up. See you in the morning. 8:45, right? Actually, would you mind if I borrowed your car and drove myself to breakfast? I kind of want to be alone before I see my dad. Sure, that's fine. It wasn't fine, but what else could he say? Just stop by my room for the key. Do you mind if I get it from you now? She was already on her feet and ready to follow him upstairs. That way, you can sleep in. She'd thought of everything, specifically every possible way to avoid him. He couldn't even be her chauffeur anymore. Sure, I'll get it for you. As he made his way to his bedroom, he came to a conclusion. For someone who wanted things to stay the same, Gracie was making a lot of changes to their friendship. And he for one didn't like it.
Chapter 7. Gracie. Gracie asked for a corner table when she arrived at the Good Egg on Sunday morning, so she had a clear view of the entrance. She kept her eyes fixed on the front door, not wanting to risk the chance that her dad would walk in and not see her. Well, considering the fact she was the only customer sitting alone, it'd be hard to miss her. All around her sat families, couples either on a date or with their children, eating together. That's how weekends were supposed to be, wasn't it? Enjoying time with the ones you loved. Oh, she'd had days like that when she was growing up, her mom had made sure of it. But something, or rather someone, had always been missing from her memories. But no longer. Starting today, she was going to have a relationship with her dad, whether her mom liked it or not. She took a deep breath, her gaze drifting to the laminate tabletop. It was only then that she noticed the crumpled napkin in her hand. Boy, were her nerves getting the best of her. Despite her resolve to not care about what her mom thought, she couldn't help but feel bad that she was now doing the very thing her mom had done to her, lie. No, she hadn't come right out and lied to her mom about her plans today, but she had snuck out before her mom could ask. The only person up when she left Interlude Inn had been Chase. She'd told him she was going to grab a bite to eat but left her dad out of it. He'd given her a curious stare, but let her leave without any questions. Gracie didn't blame him for staring. Her outfit didn't exactly say, casual breakfast for one. As soon as she'd left the house, she'd buttoned up her coat, so she didn't attract any extra attention. Maybe it had been silly of her to wear the pretty pink dress she'd gotten from Desiree's, but it seemed more appropriate than jeans and a sweater. She wanted to look her best for this very important date. Anyhow, who knew when she'd ever get to wear this dress again? It wasn't like she had guys lined up to ask her out. There was only Brady, dear, sweet Brady. She cringed, remembering their conversation from last night. Distancing herself from him was the last thing she wanted to do, but it was like her mom had said, she needed to let him move on. She couldn't give him a false sense of hope when she didn't return his feelings. Hope. That was the only thing holding her together at the moment. Her fingers trembled from the adrenaline making her heart pound. She sat on her hands and took a few deep breaths. Where was her dad? A clock on the wall behind the cash register confirmed he was 10 minutes late. Gracie felt her stomach drop. This was not a good sign. She grabbed her phone from her purse and swiped it open. No new texts or missed phone calls. She even checked her Facebook messages, but there was nothing from Wade Malone. She had just about given up on seeing her dad when she heard the jingle of the bell hanging on the restaurant's door. She glanced up, and that's when she saw him. The blonde, blue-eyed man from the Facebook profile she'd just been viewing. Her dad had a little more gray along his temples than he had in his photo, but he wore the same charming smile. He spotted her and waved, taking quick strides toward her table. "Darling. Come give me a hug." His voice was low, as if he had spoken into a megaphone. He held out his arms and gestured for her to approach. Breathless, she managed to murmur a soft, "Hi there." Wow. Wade Malone was larger than life. Even though he wasn't as tall as Brady or Chase, he had a big presence. From his broad shoulders to his loud laugh, everything about her dad called for attention. No wonder her mom had fallen for him. Gracie stood to receive the hug he offered. His build was surprisingly thin under his red flannel shirt, but he had a firm grip. The other thing she noticed was his strong cologne. The scent wasn't nearly as pleasant as the one Chase had recently created for his fragrance line. She could pick out the citrus and woody floral scents in Chase's, but the only scent she recognized from her dad's was that of sweet alcohol. And stale cigarettes. Maybe he had sat in a taxi or bus with someone who'd been smoking. He pulled back and regarded her before taking a seat. "I can't believe my eyes. You've grown into such a beautiful woman." "Thank you." She paused, not knowing what to call him. "Should I call you Mr. Malone or something else?" Wade threw his head back, chuckling. "Mr. Malone. Dad is fine. No need to be so formal with me." "Okay. Dad." The word rolled off her tongue quite easily for the first time using it. "I think I could get used to that." He quirked a brow. "You better get used to it, young lady." Gracie giggled at his exaggerated tone. Was this what it was like to have a father? Having someone around to tease her and make her laugh? Yes, sir. Sir. I'm not old enough to be a sir. I'm not old enough to have a daughter your age either, but miracles do happen. He winked. So, tell me about yourself. We have so much to catch up on. She nodded, eager to tell him everything he'd missed the last 18 years, but her stomach chose that moment to grumble. Do you mind if we order first? I'm pretty hungry. Of course. I'm starving myself. He gestured for a server to come take their order. A curly-haired brunette with bold red lipstick approached them. She gave Wade a big smile and Gracie a tight-lipped one. What'll it be for you two? I can't eat breakfast at the Good Egg and not get their famous French toast. I'll take one order of that with a side of scrambled eggs and bacon. And black coffee, Wade added. What about you, Gracie? Just French toast for me. I'll have a coffee, too, but with cream and sugar in mine, please. Gracie handed their menus to the server whose name tag read Betty. She didn't know why, but she had a feeling the woman, who was a new employee at the restaurant since she'd left for college, didn't like her. Betty gave her a quick once-over before turning back to Wade. If you get tired of the young-un, Wadey, you know where to find me. Wade coughed, his cheeks flushing a bright pink. This is Gracie, my daughter. Your daughter? My word, I had no idea. She flashed Gracie an apologetic smile. Aren't you a sweet thing? You keep an eye on your old man for me, you hear? Make sure he stays out of trouble. What was going on? Confused, Gracie could only nod. I'll put your order in right away, Betty called out as she walked off to the kitchen. Don't mind her, Wade commented with a wave of his hand. She's just playing around. Do you guys know each other? He cleared his throat. We met last night outside the restaurant. We got to talking a bit after she ended her shift, that's all. There seemed to be more to the story than her dad was letting on, but who was she to ask him questions? They had only just met. She did want to know everything about him, but maybe some topics were better left untouched. But where did they start? 18 years was a lot to cram into one morning. She didn't need to worry because her father began shooting questions at her. So, tell me about yourself. You mentioned you're in your first year of college. What are you studying? Any ideas on what you want to be when you grow up? Gracie smiled, relieved to be talking about something safe. I'm only taking general ed classes right now, but I want to major in the sciences. I'd like to be a high school teacher. A teacher? Well, if I had a teacher who looked like you back at Romance Valley High, I might have paid more attention in school, he joked. That's a mighty fine choice for a career. Helping people and all that good stuff. I bet your mama's proud of you, especially with you being the first from both our sides to go to college. My mama. She guessed the topic of her mom would come up, but she hadn't expected it so soon. She is, and I try my best to make good grades so I don't let her down. She works really hard to support me. Wade nodded, his expression thoughtful. And how is Bella doing these days? Bella? She only uses that for, Gracie caught herself before she revealed her mom's pen name. With the way news and rumors traveled in their small town, her mom preferred to keep her songwriting success a secret. I've never heard anyone call her that before. It was a special name I gave her because she was such a beauty, inside and out. Still is, I bet. Yeah, she is. Her next question popped out before she could stop herself. If you liked her so much, why did you leave? He didn't seem fazed by her question. He simply answered, she told me to. Gracie waited for him to say more, but they were interrupted by Betty, who came by to deliver their food. Wade rubbed his hands together in anticipation. He picked up his fork and motioned for her to eat. Come on, let's dig in. Despite her hunger earlier, the sweet aroma of maple syrup mixed with savory spices didn't appeal to her. She'd lost her appetite. Instead, she took a sip of her coffee. Ick. The hot liquid not only burned her tongue, it left her annoyed. Betty had forgotten the cream and sugar. Their conversation wasn't the only thing leaving a bitter aftertaste in her mouth. She set the mug down and stared at her plate. Darling? Lifting her lashes, she saw blue eyes that reminded her so much of her own, but ones she didn't recognize. Yes? Why aren't you eating? I'm not hungry. Not hungry. Is this because of what happened between your mother and me? Sighing, he set his fork down and wiped his mouth with a paper napkin. Darling, when I left town, I didn't even know she was pregnant. If I had, maybe things would have been different. I didn't know that. When did you find out about me? A year later, when I came back to Romance on some business. By that time, I was involved with someone else and your mom wanted nothing to do with me. She let me see you for a few minutes and told me not to come back. I wasn't about to argue with her. If I'd learned anything from being with your mother, it was to respect her wishes. She's one strong and independent woman. Protective, too, when it comes to you. He paused. She doesn't know you're here, does she? Gracie smirked. That sounded like her mama. She could be as sweet as an angel, yet as fierce as a mother bear. Gracie could imagine the shock and anger on her mama's face if her mom were to see her here with her dad. No way, she didn't have to imagine it because there she was. The bell on the front door chimed as her mama stormed in, her cheeks crimson red. Before Gracie could explain herself, her mom grabbed her arm and pulled her to her feet. Grace Dakota Sutton. You wait for me outside, young lady. Gracie took one look at her dad's wary expression and did as she was told. She rushed out of the restaurant and ran smack into a tall figure waiting on the sidewalk. Brady? He reached out to steady her. Gracie, where are you going? She shook free from his grasp, her eyes filling with tears. How could you tell my mom where I was? You were supposed to keep it a secret. Now I'll never get to know my dad. Wait, I can explain. Save your breath. She tucked her coat around herself, trying to ward off the chill in the air. It did little to stop her body from shaking though, she was too worked up. Her only thought was to run, so that's what she did. She took off down the street as quickly as her heels would allow, leaving a bewildered Brady behind.
Chapter 8. Brady. Brady's heart ached as he watched Gracie run off. Well, he'd done it this time. Why, oh why, had he told Miss Sutton the truth? Why hadn't he stayed in his room and not interrupted her conversation with Chase? He sighed. Because it had been more than a conversation, it had been on the verge of an argument. And he knew how important it was to Gracie that her mom and Chase's relationship work out. Curiosity had gotten the better of him, and he decided to find out what was going on. He could still hear their exchange in his mind. Where did she say she was going? Miss Sutton's voice had traveled through her closed bedroom door and down the hall. I'm her mother. I need to know if she's okay. Chase's voice was lower and calmer, which had made it hard for Brady to hear his reply. He approached the door and leaned his ear against it, hoping to make out some of the words. I don't know. She didn't say where, just that she was going out for breakfast. What's wrong? Why are you so worried? We ended on such a bad note yesterday. She's never given me the silent treatment before. I hate not having things resolved. I should have made her talk to me last night. Why did I let her sleep downstairs? She needed her space. It's normal for her to be upset after what you told her. That's the thing. I didn't get to tell her everything. She didn't give me a chance to explain. She'll come around. Just give her time. She needs to figure things out on her own. But I'm her mother. She always tells me everything. Izzy, Gracie's an adult now. She's been living on her own for the past 5-6 months. She's not the same person she was when she left home. You can't expect your relationship to be what it used to be either. How would you know? You don't have kids. You don't know what it's like being a parent. Brady winced and stepped back from the door. Miss Sutton's volume had grown, along with her frustration. He sure hoped Chase had a good answer for her. You're right, I don't know what it's like being a parent, but I do know what it's like being a kid. I'm sure you remember, too. No 18-year-old wants their mom telling them what to do or how to feel. And no 18-year-old tells their mom everything. You don't think I know that? That's the reason why I'm worried. You know what happened when I kept secrets from my mom? Gracie happened. Oh my word, do you think, hold on, let's not jump to any conclusions. Chase Lockhart, I'll jump to conclusions if I want to. Alrighty then. I guess no 36-year-old wants to be told what to do either, Chase remarked with a soft chuckle. Come here, baby. Tell me what you're thinking. Something just doesn't feel right. Gracie never decides to spontaneously come home for the weekend. Ever since she got here, she's been acting strangely. She's so distracted and secretive. And she brought a boy with her. She says she doesn't like Brady, but I see the way she looks at him. There's definitely something going on between them. Brady's ears perked up. Whoa, wait, what? Did Miss Sutton see something he didn't? He's a good kid. So, they like each other, these things happen. If she had to fall for someone, I'm glad she chose a guy who's a good friend. Man, if Brady had the guts to knock on the door and fist bump Chase right then and there, he would've. Instead, he squeezed one eye shut and twisted his lips to the side to make a mental note to tell all his friends to buy his next album. There was a moment of silence on the other side of the door. Brady wondered if Chase had managed to ease Miss Sutton's worries. Oh my word, she gasped. Do you think Gracie's pregnant? Maybe she came home to see the doctor. That could be where she is right now. Izzy, that's really stretching things. Just because you got pregnant at her age doesn't mean she will, too. But it's totally possible. Especially when you're away at college with no one to keep an eye on you. Every time I call her, she says she's studying with Brady. What if studying was code word for something else? Who knows what those two have been doing when they were supposed to be studying? Heat rose from Brady's neck, past the collar of his polo shirt and up his face. He couldn't believe what Miss Sutton was suggesting. He and Gracie had never even held hands. She clearly had the wrong idea. He was thankful Gracie wasn't around to overhear her mom, but since she wasn't there to set the record straight, he felt the need to step in. The conversation would only get even more out of control if he didn't. That's when he'd knocked on the door and told Miss Sutton about Gracie's breakfast date with her dad. Now, here he was, wishing he could set the record straight with Gracie. That's why he'd come to the Good Egg, to explain why he'd betrayed her trust. But he'd lost his chance and possibly also his best friend. He lost sight of Gracie when she turned a corner a couple of streets away. Part of him wished he had run after her, but the disdain in her voice had frozen him in place. She'd never talked to him that way before. He didn't know if he could take more, and he certainly didn't know how to make things better. Sighing, he switched his gaze to the restaurant window. Inside, Gracie's parents were engaged in a heated conversation as evidenced by their frowns and stiff postures. The exchange continued until one of the servers brought what looked like the bill and pointed to the door. Miss Sutton stomped out of the restaurant with Gracie's dad following behind, his hands clutching a large brown paper bag that likely held the remainder of his food. Brady took a few steps back to distance himself. He pulled his phone out of his jacket pocket and pretended to scroll through his email. As discreetly as he could, he checked out Gracie's dad from the corner of his eye. The man's appearance surprised him. He had a handsome face and a confident stance, but his clothes didn't seem to match. His loafers were worn with holes at the toes and his thin jacket was more appropriate for Californian winters. Even from where he stood, Brady could see the lines around his eyes that made him appear older than Miss Sutton, though he guessed they were around the same age. Honestly, he hadn't known what to expect with Gracie's dad, but this man wasn't it. Something didn't feel right about him. Miss Sutton, having calmed down a bit, now spoke in an even, quieter tone. "Wade, for Gracie's sake, I'll help you. But you need to get your act together. I don't want you appearing in her life now, only to disappear in a few months. That would crush her. I won't let you hurt her like that. I won't, Bella. I'll try harder this time. Please don't call me that. Izzy, I've changed. Give me a chance to prove it. I hope you have. Gracie's an amazing girl. You'd know that if you hadn't left romance." Wade nodded. "I know. You did a good job with her. I did what I had to. I need to go, Wade, but I'll be in touch." Brady glanced up as Miss Sutton walked over to him. He slipped his phone back in his pocket and gave her what he hoped was a casual smile. "Hey, I was, just checking my feeds." She raised a brow and smirked. "And trying not to overhear any more conversations, right? You seem to have a knack for doing that today." "I really, wasn't trying to, again." He winced and ducked his head. This was so not how he had wanted to impress Gracie's mom. "It's okay, Brady. I know your heart's in the right place. I appreciate you being there for Gracie. She's lucky to have you in her life." He raised his gaze to meet hers. The smile on her face set him at ease until he remembered Gracie's parting words. "I don't think she feels the same way about me right now. She ran off as soon as she saw me. I tried to tell her what happened, but she didn't want to hear it." Miss Sutton sighed, her breath visible in the cold air. She stuck her hands in her coat pockets and nodded for him to follow. "She'll come around once she knows everything. Come on, I have a good idea where she might have gone." Brady sure hoped so. He didn't want to imagine his life without Gracie in it.
Chapter 9. Gracie. Gracie's feet took her down memory lane, quite literally, as she ran along the sidewalk away from the good egg. Each business she passed held a distinct place in her mind of moments she'd spent there when she was younger. The days she had wandered into sweet retreat after school to pick up a new lotion or body scrub. The times she had spent in pages of romance, browsing through their new romance books. Even the few trips she'd made to Romance Hardware to pick up things for the house had been memorable. Why? Because she'd gone to these stores with her mom at one time or another. She swallowed past the lump in her throat as tears gathered in her eyes. Her toes hurt from being pinched in her heels, but the pain was nothing compared to the ache in her heart. The morning had not turned out at all like she'd hoped. Not only was her relationship with her mom strained, now she and Brady were also on shaky ground. Despite all the people milling about downtown, Gracie had never felt so alone. What made things worse was the fact that every store was decorated in festive shades of pinks and reds. There were hearts everywhere in the forms of heart-shaped balloons, heart-shaped wreaths, and heart-shaped banners. The town sure knew how to commemorate Valentine's Day, but it offered little help for real-life matters of the heart. How did one celebrate love when they weren't on speaking terms with the ones they loved? Not everyone had perfect relationships like the founders of romance must have had. With no answers of her own, Gracie arrived at the one place where she hoped to find solace. She glanced up at the row of historic homes in front of her and approached the large one in the center. As expected, the Donaldson house was ready for the upcoming holiday, its wraparound porch decorated with hearts and garlands of flowers. The home was accessible to the public, but there was more activity inside than expected for this early in the day. Through one of the large bay windows, Gracie saw a man and a woman talking. She guessed they were the company sponsors assigned to decorate a room for the ball. She wasn't in the mood to talk to anyone, but she did want a sneak peek at the inside since she wouldn't be around on Valentine's Day. It would be nice to see the decor and how it differed from that of the previous years. She made her way up the steps and through the front door, careful to step lightly so as not to attract attention. The people she'd seen through the window walked out into the foyer as she entered. The young couple, she assumed they were a couple by their cutesy smiles, greeted her. The man nodded toward the room they'd just left. "We'll be back to work on the room later. Feel free to check it out." "Thanks, I will," Gracie answered, before walking through the wide doorway. Once inside, her jaw dropped as she took in the sight. A large replica of the Eiffel Tower, twice as tall as she was, stood in the center of the floor. Several brown boxes containing more decorations lay on the floor around it. The tower alone was impressive. She could imagine how much prettier everything would look once the entire room was decorated. Too bad she wouldn't be here to see it, or maybe it was a good thing. What good was it to make a memory if she couldn't make it with someone she loved? Without Brady by her side, it just wouldn't be the same. Gracie gasped. Where had that thought come from? How did she go from thinking about someone she loved to thinking about Brady? It didn't make sense. Her stomach growled as if in agreement. Her appetite had returned in full force. Maybe she was so hungry, she was delirious. Footsteps approached, interrupting her thoughts. She spun around and came face to face with her mom. "Mama? How'd you find me?" Relief softened her mom's features. "I'm your mom. Of course I'd know where to look for you." She paused. "Except for earlier. I did need some help with that." "Gracie, why didn't you tell me you were meeting your dad?" I didn't know how you'd react, if you'd be okay with me seeing him." "You already said you didn't want him to contact us." "But, Mama, what's so wrong about getting to know my own father?" Her emotions from earlier returned with a vengeance. "I was this close," she held up her index finger and thumb an inch apart, "to getting to know him. Why did you have to ruin it for me?" Her mom released a long breath, her expression pained. "Sweetheart, I can explain." She walked over to sit on the bench under one of the bay windows. Patting the spot beside her, she urged Gracie to join her. She reluctantly sat down. As angry as she was, she needed to give her mom a chance to share her side. She only hoped it was good. "Okay, so explain it to me." "It's a long story, Gracie, but the short version is that your father has many strengths, but taking care of himself and others isn't one of them." He drinks more than he should, and he has trouble holding onto a job because of that. He doesn't have the best track record with relationships either. I knew life with him wouldn't be stable or secure, and I couldn't bring you into that kind of environment. You deserved more, so much more. She sighed. That's why I told him not to contact us. It wasn't because I was trying to keep him from you. I was trying to keep you safe. Gracie swallowed hard. Her defenses fell away for the first time that day, and she could see what she'd been denying. The cologne she thought her dad had been wearing was actually the smell of alcohol. His thin frame and the way he'd gulped down his food, he probably hadn't had a good meal in a while. And the flirtatious comments the server had made, everything her mom said made sense. Wade Malone wasn't the man she thought he was. I had no idea. Is he going to be okay? Izzy nodded. He will be in time. Now that I have some money saved up, I'll make sure he gets the help he needs. I'm doing this for you, Gracie. You should get to know your father. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Gracie was having a hard time putting her words together, so she reached for her mom's hand and squeezed it. It's okay. I was waiting to tell you everything when you got older, but I guess I didn't realize you had already grown up. Or maybe I didn't want to admit you had. Her mouth curved up in a bittersweet smile. Guess what? Chase and I had our first argument today over this. He seems to think you're an adult now, and I should treat you like one. Oh no. She and Brady were already on bad terms, her mama and Chase couldn't be, too. Are you guys okay? How bad was your fight? We're fine, Gracie. The only bad part was me having to admit he was right, she said in a wry tone. I've been doing everything on my own for so long, it's taking me some time to get used to hearing other opinions. But I'm trying. Just like I'm going to try to treat you like an adult. But please promise me, no more silent treatments. It hurts too much when we don't get along. Oh, Mama, of course. I hate fighting with you, too. Gracie wrapped her arms around her mom and gave her a long hug. I'm so glad you and Chase are okay. Someone needs to celebrate Valentine's Day this year. Her mom pulled back and studied her. What about you and Brady? Are the two of you going to be okay? Gracie crossed her arms, remembering why she'd been upset with him. I can't believe he told you where I was. Before you get too mad, you need to know he was only trying to help. Of course you'd be on his side. That's because he's on your side. Give him a chance, Gracie. He's a good guy. Cute, too. But I think you knew that already. She winked, then tipped her head toward the window. Gracie followed her mom's gaze outside. There was Brady, head down, with his hands stuffed into his pockets. He was pacing back and forth along the sidewalk, muttering to himself. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks and glanced up at the window. Their eyes locked, and her heart skipped a beat. Her mom was right, everything about him was adorable. How his whole face lit up when he saw her, to the endearing way he waved at her with his hands still in his pocket, she felt like the luckiest girl in the world to be on the receiving end of his affection. She couldn't believe it had taken her so long to see how much he cared for her, and to realize how much she cared for him. He is pretty great, isn't he? Grinning, her mom stood up. I'm gonna walk back to my car. Will you be okay getting a ride home with Brady? Yeah. Thanks, Mama. Through the window, Gracie watched her mom give Brady a pat on the arm before walking off. He faced the house and began making his way to the door. She rose to her feet, ready to meet him. Still, she was surprised at the butterflies in her stomach. She'd never been so nervous around her best friend before, but she had a feeling things were going to change, in a big way.
Chapter 10. Brady. Brady ran up the path leading to the historic home as fast as his long legs would take him. He only had one thing on his mind: to get to Gracie's side. The smile she'd given him from the window had to be a good sign. Maybe her mom had put in a good word for him and she wasn't upset anymore. He hoped that was the case. More than anything, he wanted to have his friend back. He wanted things to go back to normal, for them to hang out like they used to. He couldn't wait to talk to her. If only his big feet would do their part and keep up. He bounded up the steps, taking them two at a time, until his sneaker caught on the edge of one and set him off balance. He plunged forward, landing on his hands and knees on the cold cement ground. He groaned. What a way to make an entrance. He could only hope Gracie hadn't seen his fall. Brady. Are you okay? Too late. She was already at his side, pulling him up to his feet. I'm good. You know me, just making my usual grand entrance. She gazed up at him, her blue eyes sparkling with appreciation. I like your entrances. You wouldn't be you without them. Something in her tone made his cheeks warm, or maybe he'd already been blushing from embarrassment. Either way, he had a hard time keeping his thoughts straight with the way she was looking at him. He tried thinking of something clever to say in return, but all that came out was, I guess I'll keep on tripping over my feet then. Gracie laughed. Just not more than usual, all right? He nodded. It seemed they were on good terms again, but he wanted to be sure. Are we okay? Totally okay. I'm sorry I was so mean to you. I shouldn't have run off. You deserve better than that. He released the breath he'd been holding. Don't worry about it. I'm just happy we're talking again. That was the simple truth. Even if they never moved beyond friendship, he would learn to be content. And now that she was listening, he wanted to explain himself. I want you to know I would never go back on my word unless there was a good reason to. Your friendship, he corrected himself, means a lot to me. I wouldn't do anything to hurt you. I know, Brady. I know you wouldn't. The way Gracie chewed on her lower lip made him wonder if there was more she wanted to say. He waited for an extra beat, but she stayed quiet. He nodded down the street and asked, ready to go? Yeah. We should probably head back to campus soon. We've got early classes tomorrow. She produced a key from her coat pocket and handed it to him. Thanks for letting me borrow your car. No problem. He led the way down the stairs, careful not to trip over his feet again. They strolled in silence for a while, walking at a comfortable pace that gave him time to peek inside the store windows he had rushed past earlier. So, how did your meeting with your dad go before your mom crashed it? I didn't get to talk to him much. He showed up late, we ordered, and then our food came. Not long after, my mom showed up. She released a long breath. I did find out some things from her about my dad that explains why she kept him from me all these years. She had a good reason to. He's not the person I thought he was. The sadness in her face tore at his heart. He reached out and put an arm around her shoulders, giving her a gentle squeeze. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm glad I got to meet him though. My mom's going to try to get him back on his feet. Hopefully, I'll still get to spend time with him in the future. That's cool. At least this trip home wasn't for nothing. You're glad you came back, right? I am. It's been a good weekend, even with all the drama. She pursed her lips before remarking, or maybe because of it. Even though my mom and I had our first big fight, I think we understand each other better now. It's been hard for her to let go and trust me to make my own decisions, but she's going to try. That's a good first step. For sure. Gracie's smile had returned to her face, prompting Brady to smile, too. Oh, my mom and Chase had their first argument too. It sounds like it actually helped her be more willing to listen to him, which is amazing because my mama doesn't listen to just anybody. He thought back to the conversation he'd overheard. Yeah, Chase was so patient with her. He's really mature for his age, a lot more than my brothers are. Gracie gave him a strange look. Wait, what? How do you know what happened? He flashed her a sheepish grin, because I was listening in on them. She stopped walking and faced him, her eyes wide with wonder. You eavesdropped on my mom and Chase. Why would you do that? He went on to tell her about overhearing their argument through his bedroom door and how his curiosity got the better of him. It turned out to be a good thing that I heard their conversation. If I hadn't, your mom would still be thinking you're pregnant. Her jaw dropped. What? Why in the world would she think I'm pregnant? Several passers-by glanced their way, looking a little too interested. Brady was sure in a town this small that news traveled fast. He took Gracie's hand and pulled her down the street, away from the stairs. When they reached the next block, he stopped and explained. You know, Moms, she was worried about you and one thing led to another. You showed up out of the blue at home, then you guys had that fight, and you left without saying where you were going this morning. But that doesn't explain the being pregnant part. Oh, that. Well, she said you'd never brought a guy home before, so she thought there must be something going on between us. Not that there is. Brady stopped himself before he said too much. Friends, they were only friends. That's what Gracie wanted, and he'd agreed. With everything going on in her life, he was supposed to be the one thing that stayed the same. You know, Moms and the crazy ideas they get, he added with a laugh that was a little too forced, even to his own ears. He ducked his head to avoid her eyes, and that's when he realized he was still holding her hand, and she was holding his. His heart thumped at the sight of her palm, so soft and warm, touching his palm. Her fingers were wrapped around his hand while her thumb rested on top of his. Her hand fit so well in his, making it difficult for him to let go. But he did so for their friendship's sake. Brady, wait. Gracie grabbed his hand and held on tighter than before. She also took a step closer. The sweet coconut scent of her shampoo filled the space between them. He gulped, not recognizing the intensity darkening her blue eyes. My mom does get some crazy ideas, but I don't think this is one of them. Say what? She shook her head as she rushed on. I mean, the pregnant part is definitely crazy because I've never even kissed a guy before. But the part about there being something between us, I'd like that to be true. He blinked quickly, not sure if he was hearing Gracie right. But what happened to not wanting our friendship to change? That's the thing, it's too late for that. Our friendship's already changed. Just like how my mom didn't realize I've grown up, I didn't realize how much the way I think and feel about you has changed. I don't see you as my best friend anymore, I mean I do, but I see you as more, a lot more. Her cheeks flushed a bright pink. Does what I'm saying make any sense? Let me get this right. Brady was so in shock, he wanted to make sure he understood her. Are you saying you want us, you and me, to be more than friends? Yes, she agreed with a relieved smile. If you want that, too. Do I? Of course I do. He could hardly contain his excitement. If the two of them weren't standing in the middle of the sidewalk, he would have jumped up and down and screamed out at the top of his lungs. Instead, he rocked on his heels and grinned so wide, his cheeks hurt. How many guys were lucky enough to have the girl of their dreams look at them the way Gracie was looking at him? He might not walk or talk like a leading man in a movie, but he felt like one. I can't believe how lucky I am. We're both lucky, Gracie insisted as she leaned in and wrapped her arms around his waist. He rested his chin on the top of her head, loving the feel of her heartbeat against his chest. He caught sight of the heart-shaped decor in the store window to their right. In fact, all the window displays along both sides of the street had been decorated similarly. This town was sure good at celebrating one thing, love. Maybe luck has nothing to do with it. It's this place. I get the feeling you can't come to romance and not fall in love. Gracie giggled. You wouldn't believe how many people say that, especially around this time of year. There's something magical that happens here. In my opinion, it's the best place to spend Valentine's Day. I bet it is. Brady took her comments to heart. With the holiday only 3 days away, he had a lot of planning to do. If romance was the place to celebrate love, that's where they would do it.
Chapter 11. Gracie. Gracie stood in front of the full-length mirror that hung on the back of her dorm room's door, checking her appearance one last time before Brady picked her up. She adjusted the straps of her dress and slipped on a pair of heels. A simple silver headband held back her hair, which fell in loose waves around her shoulders. Her only jewelry was a pair of dangling pearl earrings her mom had lent her before she left home 3 days ago. When she and Brady had officially become more than friends, Valentine's Day was all she could think about. She'd never had a reason to celebrate the holiday, but now she had the best one, a date with her best friend. She had no idea how they'd be spending the evening, other than dressed up in their fanciest outfits, as Brady had suggested. She was so glad he hadn't seen the pink dress she'd gotten from Desiree's. She'd had her coat buttoned up the last time she'd worn it. Today was the perfect opportunity to wow Brady with it. Her cheeks flushed just thinking about him. She laughed at her reflection and how much it reminded her of Brady. Dear, sweet Brady. How many times had she seen him blush and stammer around her? She now understood why he hadn't been himself. Being near the person you cared so much about was exciting and scary and overwhelming, all at the same time. But it was also the best feeling. No wonder the founders of romance had believed in love so much. She sighed. What she wouldn't do to be home today. Her mom had texted her photos of the Donaldson house in all its Valentine glory, and it was even more lovely than she'd expected. At least her mom and Chase would get to enjoy the ball tonight. A quick knock signaled Brady's arrival. Gracie quickly grabbed her coat and purse, then opened the door. The sight of her boyfriend, oh, how she loved that word, dressed in a navy blue blazer and slacks made her jaw drop. Brady, you look amazing. Thanks. I borrowed the outfit from Chase, including the shoes. He pointed to the shiny pair of brown leather Oxfords on his feet. I think he wore this to the American Music Awards last year. Pretty cool, huh? Oh, but you, his eyes widened in awe, you look beautiful. Wow. Thanks. She smiled. Is the dress okay for where we're going? It's perfect. Come on, we better get going. We don't want to be late. Gracie locked her door and took Brady's arm as they walked down the hall and out of the building. Can you tell me where we're going now? Nope, sorry, it's a surprise. Please. Just one clue. He led her to where his car was parked on the street and helped her inside. Once he was behind the wheel, he turned to her and grinned. Okay, one clue. We're going someplace magical. That's all I'm going to say. Someplace magical. He started the engine and made his way onto the road. And it's going to take us about an hour to get there, so get comfortable. An hour? Gracie glanced out her window as she considered the route they were on. When they headed out of the city and merged onto I-5, she had a pretty good idea of where they were headed. Brady, we're going home, aren't we? Is that all right with you? She squealed in delight. Totally. Do my mom and Chase know we're coming? Yep, no surprises this time, at least for them. Gracie settled back in her seat and smiled. This is the best Valentine's Day ever. Thank you, Brady. We're not even there yet. It's already the best because I get to spend it with you. He reached for her hand that was resting on the center console and gave it a gentle squeeze. Same here. It'll only get better once we're in romance. And it did. When they arrived at the ball, Gracie and Brady walked up the steps of the historic house, hand in hand. The inside of the home was even more amazing in person. Each room had been decorated with its own theme, the Paris one being the most beautiful. The addition of white Christmas lights, paper hearts, red and pink bows, and candles made the Eiffel Tower look even more magical. Soft music playing in the background also added to the romantic mood. Gracie found her mom and Chase standing next to the tower, chatting away. Mama, Chase, happy Valentine's Day. You guys made it. You look beautiful, Gracie, her mom gushed. And you clean up quite well, Brady. Your outfit, it looks familiar. Chase chuckled. That's because it's mine, even down to the shoes. Thanks again for letting me borrow it, Brady remarked. Do you want something to drink, Gracie? A soda would be good, thanks. Why don't you and I go get the drinks, Gracie? I'll get your mom a refill, too, Chase piped up. You okay with a soda, Brady? Sure, thanks. Gracie and Brady exchanged curious glances before she followed Chase to the refreshments table. She was about to ask him what was going on when he motioned for her to step to the side. Once they were out of earshot of the people close by, he whispered, I want to show you something. But you need to keep it a secret for now. Huh? She watched him pull a box out of his jacket pocket and open it. Inside the velvet cushion sat a large diamond solitaire ring. She gasped. Is that for what I think it's for? Are you proposing to my mama? Not yet, but soon. I'm waiting for the right moment. He closed the box and returned it to his pocket. I wanted to be sure it was okay with you first though. What do you think, Gracie? She peered over her shoulder at her mom and Brady talking across the room. There was nothing she wanted more than for her mom to be happy, and Chase made her happy. Happier than she'd been in a long time. She looked back at Chase and nodded her approval. I think she's going to love it. I know she loves you, and you love her, right? With all my heart. Then go for it. You have my blessing. Thank you, Gracie, that's all I needed to hear. He nodded toward the drinks table and made his way over to pick up 2 glasses of champagne. We better get back. She took 2 glasses of soda from the table. Is it okay if I tell Brady? Of course. He's a guy after my own shoe size, he joked. They made their way back to her mom and Brady and handed them their drinks. Hey, there's a room upstairs that I want to show you, Brady announced to Gracie. Come with me. Sure. We'll be back, she informed her mom and Chase. As they walked away, she grabbed his arm, eager to tell him the exciting news. Guess what, Chase is going to propose to my mama. Whoa, are you serious? Didn't they just start dating a few months ago? Yes, but they're in love. He even asked for my blessing. That's cool. They deserve to be happy. Just like we're happy. He led her upstairs and paused in the hallway in front of the first room on the right. You are happy, right? The happiest I've ever been. She peered around his shoulder to try to look inside the room. What do you have in there? Another surprise? Just a small one. I had some help from your mom and Chase to put it together. He took her hand and pulled her inside. Happy Valentine's Day, Gracie. They stepped inside the room, which had been decorated with pink roses and stuffed bears in all sizes and colors. Each bear held a picture in a silver frame. Gracie walked toward the nearest plush toy and picked up the photo. It was a selfie she and Brady had taken when they accidentally wore the same green Oregon Ducks hoodie on the same day. The bear next to it, as well as all the other bears, held more pictures of the two of them taken on other occasions. In all the photos, they were smiling and having fun. It was a wonderful collection of memories. Can you guess the theme of this room? Brady asked as he joined her side. I'm not sure. Does it have something to do with memories? Kind of. I call it a dream room. Because you make all my dreams come true. He raised a brow and added, it's not too cheesy, is it? Not cheesy at all. Rather romantic, in fact. Just like you. Gracie drew close to him and wrapped her arms around his neck. You surprise me, Brady, in so many good ways. Thank you for this. Thank you for being my Valentine. Do you think we can take a picture to remember tonight by? Sure, but I didn't bring my selfie stick. No problem. He set their drinks down on a table in the corner, then dug his phone out of his pocket and held it up. I just need one hand to hold this and the other one to do this. He tipped her chin up and very gently brought his mouth to hers. The flash went off as their lips touched. Gracie felt Brady's hand caress her back, holding her close as her legs turned to what could only be described as mush. This was what kissing was like. The kiss was better than she imagined and it also ended too soon. She gazed up at Brady and returned the grin he shot her. My first kiss. Mine, too. And now it's memorialized for life. He swiped to the picture they'd taken. What do you think? She studied the photo for a moment, still feeling the warmth of the kiss on her lips. What an incredible weekend it had turned out to be. She had reunited with her dad. Her mom and Chase were about to be engaged. She had discovered love where it had been all along, in her best friend. And they were spending Valentine's Day in the most romantic place on earth. Life couldn't be better. With her heart filled to the brim with joy, she leaned on Brady's shoulder and simply replied, I think this is what romantically ever after looks like.
The end. Thank you so much for listening to this audiobook. To find out more about Liwen Waiho's other books, please visit her website at liwenho.com. And be sure to subscribe to this channel so you'll be notified when a new audiobook releases.